Pressure High Fantasy is a role-playing system designed for collaborative storytelling. It is a dice-light, rules-light system designed to help everybody at the table contribute to the narrative flow of the story as it's being told. Unlike most tabletop role-playing games, the dice in Pressure don't decide whether you succeed or fail. Instead, these dice focus on how difficult something was for you to accomplish. While each individual player will be charged with playing their own character within the world, the guide will be in charge of the rest of the world and how it interacts with those characters. The guide's primary responsibility is facilitating the game experience, adjudicating game decisions, and encouraging collaboration and adventure. While the system will govern the results, the guide will interpret the outcomes and how they impact the story. Without further ado, let's get into the basic rules of play. Pressure is a representation of how much stress an entity is under. Every entity has a pressure gauge. Pressure can be affected in a number of ways, from environmental factors, mood-based factors, or being attacked in combat. During gameplay, pressure is either alleviated or added. In general, the guide will decide if something is alleviating or adding pressure. If ever an entity's pressure gauge is full, any additional pressure will result in a wound. Wounds occur when an entity's pressure threshold is overwhelmed. If an entity takes pressure over what their pressure threshold is, they will receive a wound. Different entities will react to wounds differently. For players, the first wound received will reduce that player's agency in a way that is healable over a short span of time. This could be a broken bone or a punctured lung. Something that is debilitating and will hurt that character's agency for several weeks, but will eventually heal on its own. The second wound a player receives should represent some more permanent loss of agency. This could include a lost eye or a lost limb, but the consequence should prevent the player from being able to interact with the world as they did previously, in a way that is not easily remedied. The third wound is a total loss of agency. Generally, this is death or complete mental incapacitation. Mana is a pressure mechanic specific to Pressure High Fantasy. Mana is a pool of magical energy that is stored inside a character's body. This is represented as mana sitting atop one's pressure gauge. As mana is spent to weave arcane spells, one's pressure threshold is reduced. Entities are able to recover mana through rest, or with the help of certain items or other effects. The recovery rate is, in general, 1 mana per hour of rest, but environmental factors may influence this rate. Ki is the raw flow of life energy. Martial artists have learned to harness this ki. As such, they may use it as a weapon or a shield. While the Tier 1 proficiency martial arts is generalized hand-to-hand combat, the deeper tiers focus exclusively on ki. Tier 2 martial arts are ki strikes, ki weapons, and ki techniques respectively. Every Tier 3 ki proficiency is some martial arts form. Mechanically, they present the same as weapons. The Tier 2 ability of every form gives the player an effect while holding their ki. The Tier 3 ability of each form expends the ki for a powerful effect. A martial artist may spend an action to gather ki. Ki will then be held until it is expended. Learning new ki forms is done in-game, much like acquiring new equipment. The guide should work with the player to make sure that they're obtaining these ki forms, as they are central to a martial arts-focused build. All characters start with 5 character creation levels. These 5 levels are designed to represent the life experience of a young adult. These 5 levels are comprised of species, culture, background, vocation, and an additional level of any of the 4 types. Attributes are used as prerequisites to take certain levels or to perform certain actions. There are 9 attributes total. These 9 attributes are derived from ranking social, mental, physical, as well as finesse, resilience, and power. By ranking these factors, we will decide which attributes are your greatest, moderate, average, slight, or weakest. Attributes are relative in Pressure. It doesn't matter how strong someone is, it matters, are they the strong one in the narrative? So the question isn't, are you strong enough to lift the boulder? It's, should the strong guy be able to lift the boulder? For a more detailed breakdown, please check out the documents in the description below. All proficiencies and levels are considered to give the character practical knowledge related to their background. There is no roll to see if one has knowledge on a subject. Instead, the guide should dole out information based on the character's background. Each character should glean something different that all combines to make one clear picture. Instead of having one character who knows everything about a particular situation, the party should combine their different perspectives to get a clear image of what's happening. If the players are stumped, having the most intelligent or intuitive character make a relevant check may be called for. Every level in Pressure is unique. In general, every level will add 5 to a character's pressure gauge. The level will also provide a unique ability as well as proficiencies. If a level offers a proficiency that a character has already obtained, then that character should take a Tier 2 or Tier 3 proficiency that is under the umbrella of the proficiency provided by the level. Some levels may require a certain set of attributes or proficiencies in order to take them. Some levels or magic items may grant a proficiency for your character to dabble in. This gives a character a very narrow focus with a very wide proficiency. Mechanically, this is done by granting a Tier 3 proficiency with the effectiveness of a Tier 1 proficiency. So, for instance, if one dabbled in the rapier, they wouldn't get access to all the additional abilities that a rapier provides, instead only being able to wield it competently as anyone with close combat could. Or if someone had dabbled in tracking, they would be able to track, but only as well as one who had proficiency in survival could. Dabbling does not give one access to anything outside of its purview. Proficiencies are a representation of your character's training and experience. There are 9 total proficiencies. Each of these proficiencies has 3 Tier 2 proficiencies underneath it. Each of these Tier 2 proficiencies has an infinite number of Tier 3 proficiencies underneath it as well. This tiered proficiency system has proficiencies going from broad to very specific. For instance, someone who has a proficiency in close combat may also gain proficiency in bladed combat, may then also gain proficiency in dagger combat. These would be representations of a Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 proficiency. In order to acquire a lower tier proficiency, you must have the higher tier proficiency as well. The deeper proficiencies are indicative of a character's expertise. For instance, when a character is using a piece of equipment, that equipment will have abilities based on the tiered proficiencies. The most basic level, the Tier 1 proficiency, will allow a character to apply pressure as normal while using the item, while the Tier 2 and Tier 3 proficiency will allow the use of extra abilities. When a character is faced with a conflict, the guide should consider the tier of proficiency when deciding potential results. The deeper the proficiency, the higher the baseline success, and the lower the ultimate potential failure should be. When dice need to be rolled, it is time for conflict checks. There are 3 types of conflict checks: uncontested, cumulative, and contested. Uncontested conflicts happen when only the player's will is at play. This could mean jumping across an obstacle or trying to use knowledge to solve a problem. If there isn't an opposing will, the player is doing it uncontested. The player in question will roll 2 10-sided dice. One of these dice will be positive, and the other will be negative. Once the dice are rolled, the results will be added together, and the player will add their effective character level. This result will then be compared to the challenge rating the guide assigned to the task in question. The difference between the player's result and the challenge rating will be applied as pressure to the player's pressure gauge. In certain instances, the guide may decide that failure is on the table. In such a case, the guide should inform the player clearly that failure is an option before they attempt the roll. Cumulative checks are actions that take a long time to accomplish and may require starting and stopping over time. These could be such things as mining gemstones, solving a difficult puzzle, or any number of other complex tasks. In this instance, anyone participating in the cumulative check will roll 2d10, 1 positive, 1 negative. They will then add these numbers together and add their character level. These results will be applied as pressure to the pressure tracker for the item or task in question. Contested conflicts are a little more complicated, and we'll go over them in the next video. Contested conflicts happen when one or more entities are in direct conflict with one another. These entities will declare their action and any targets of those actions. Once all intent has been declared and all targets have been identified, All involved will roll dice. These dice will be 2d10, one positive, one negative. Like with other checks, it is a good idea to have these dice be visually distinct, so you can always easily discern which one is the positive and which one is the negative. Once the dice have been rolled, their values will be added up, and the character's effective character level will be added to the result. These results will then be applied as pressure towards the intended target. Entities that are targeting the same entity will have their pressure results combined. If entities are targeting one another, their pressures will be compared against one another, and only the difference between the two pressure will be applied to the one who was presenting the lower pressure in the conflict. Time and space are relative in pressure. We're only concerned with how entities and objects relate to one another. There are two distinct flows of time: in rounds and out of rounds. Out of rounds, players are free to declare actions rather loosely and working out an order or timing after the fact. Feel free to allow the duration of events to be determined by the narrative, not by real life. In rounds, there are defined sequences of events to determine what actions are to be taken by the characters and when. Most conflicts occur within rounds. When time flows in rounds, it moves through three phases: declaration, action, and resolution. At the start of the declaration phase, the guide will announce the non-player character's intentions. This declaration could be as vague or specific as the guide feels appropriate for the situation. Then the players will announce their intentions. Declarations by the players should always be very specific in when including the actions being taken, any movement needed to complete the action, and any relevant abilities and targets if applicable. During the action phase, all NPCs and players follow through on their declared intentions. Everyone will roll appropriate dice at the guide's discretion. Everything is happening at the same time within game. Contested conflict resolution rules are used to determine the results. The guide may rule that an action takes multiple rounds to complete when appropriate. During the resolution phase, any reactions are declared and all results are applied as appropriate.